Hey there, all you ghouls and goblins. Radio 85.9 proudly presents Horror Zoid with your hosts, Stevie Scares and Natalie Nightmare, talking all things horror from the 80s, 90s, and today. Today's episode is brought to you by Horga Senior Living. Trust your loved ones with us in their golden years. Horga Senior Living Facility. Rules and regulations apply. Void where prohibited, and all seniors must be willing to sacrifice themselves at the age of 72 for the better benefit of the cult and the Horga. Well, sure as God's got sandals, we're back with another episode of Horror Zoid. I'm Stevie Scares.
And I'm Natalie Nightmare.
Thank you for joining us, everybody, for another week of exciting horror movie action. We're still going through our favorite genres and some of our favorite films that encompass that genre. Today, we are talking about folk horror.
This one's been a tough subject for us because there's a lot of gray area and you kind of start splitting hairs the more you talk about what makes a folk horror movie a folk horror movie. And so we've had some debate, and hopefully you guys can join in on that a little bit as we talk about some of these movies.
Yeah, folk horror, Natalie has a very specific definition of what folk horror is to her, whereas I have a very much more broad definition of folk horror. To me, folk horror is literally, if you're in the middle of nowhere, you're in a fucking folk horror movie. Like, I'm sorry, like that to me, like that's all it takes. So you can see why there would be a lot of films that fall into that genre.
Yeah, and this is one of those though that I had to do a lot of kind of reading and different, like top 15 folk horror movies just to kind of like get my brain going a little bit to think about some of the movies we wanted to talk about. But, with it, if you go to Wiki, which is like, the godsend of the modern age, but it usually includes a rural setting, themes of isolation, power of nature. I'm literally reading it verbatim. What it may include. And so there's a lot of, again, kind of gray areas because some of the movies, even one that we posted on TikTok, I feel like some people would argue isn't folk horror, but I think it is, and we'll get to that later. But, one that's glaringly obvious and recent, and a lot of people love it or hate it, that I wanted to talk about is The Witch.
The Witch is a good one. Before we get into The Witch, though, just want to do some quick housekeeping items. Don't forget, leave us a review for Horror Zoid wherever you listen to your podcast. Those reviews help bump us up.
Yes.
Keep an eye out for certain things. We're adding all sorts of little stuff. If you listen to us on Spotify, polls and questions that you can participate in. Follow us on Horror Zoid Pod. Follow us on TikTok at Horror Zoid Pod is what I meant to say.
Yeah.
So follow us on all of our outlets there, and of course horrorzoid.com if you're not sure where we're at.
And even more reason to follow now is that we kind of started to tease that here, hopefully by the end of the year, if not into the new year, we will have a store launch. The Ghouleria is going to be selling the official merchandise for Horrorzoid, but we will have merch so you can represent us. Some of it obviously will be, our logo, our name, but a lot of other fun little things involving the movies that we all love. So keep an eye out, look for that merch, and snag a shirt or hat or hoodie, whatever the fuck else I decide to make.
Yeah, we're gonna be dipping our toe into everything here, and of course, it's only the beginning. We plan on expanding and launching way more here in the future. So if you've been with us, we appreciate it, and we hope you stick with us as we keep going.
Yeah.
But without further ado, let's talk some folk horror. And right now, we're gonna start with, as Natalie said, The Witch.
Yeah, so directed by Robert Eggers, who also did The Lighthouse, which you kind of talked about potential being a folklore because of its, it kind of checks all the boxes, really.
It does check all the boxes.
But The Witch is one of those, I love the setting. Everything about this movie puts you in the time period. Obviously, we've talked about this. We did an episode on witch movies, and obviously this was included.
Talked about Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah, talked about
as
Anya
Thomason
Taylor-Joy
in our Final Girls episode.
But everything about this movie is beautiful. It really puts you in the landscape, makes you feel as much unease as the family does, and I think that's ultimately what makes this a perfect example of a folk horror.
No, it does, and the fact that the fucking movie starts and they are literally cast out of their church for being too religious and too extreme in their faith.
Yikes!
And they're cast out into the middle of nowhere, and thus starts our folk horror setting of them out there fending for themselves. As we mentioned, they are They have to hunt for their own food. They have to grow their own produce. They literally have to take care of everything.
Right before harvest, so like good luck. You should be harvesting, and they're just trying to find good earth to have any kind of produce to move into winter. And of course, you have the iconic scene from the trailer where she's playing peekaboo with the baby, and then she looks and the baby's gone and they don't know where it went, and thus kicks off our lovely chase of cat and mouse with the witch and who's the witch and who's not the witch.
I just love that we get
movie.
to see the witch's oil getting made with the baby and just fucking being discarded and turned into the oil. That was
right.
beautiful.
I know a lot of people joke about, the whole witches eating children to stay young, but it's like, we can watch Hocus Pocus where they make a weird potion, literally suck the soul out of a child, and everyone's just like, oh, it's Disney. But this is like they literally grind a baby up in a mortar and pestle and like rub it on themselves. And it's fucking terrifying. But you get this really cool, you can see that there's a mother maiden crone through the movie kind of thing. And it's just every moment of it is terrifying and beautiful. And again, the setting is just, it checks it off for me.
Yeah, and the setting is really an underrated and understated aspect of the film. We get caught up in the drama between the family and obviously the witch herself and all of these things, and as everybody just descends into madness. But really, it's a perfect example of cabin fever,
right.
Which we will get to later.
An absolute isolation, even to the point where there's no horse anymore by the end of the movie.
Yeah, no horse. There's they have
everything
Black
just
Phillip.
Feels so dreary and hopeless, and it's great.
Well, and by the end of the movie, we see that Thomasin. It makes you wonder: would she have been so quick to accept the offers of Black Phillip to live deliciously and the taste of butter and all that? Would she have been so quick to have accepted that offer had she been around other people? Had there been other influences out there? Had she not just been stuck, isolated with her crazy religious family for the last who knows how
and
fucking
two little
long.
twins that are fucking annoying.
Right, Jonas, mercy. They were obnoxious little
But I
fuckers.
love them. I think, and that's something that's really cool too, is like there's all this drama, like you said, going on with the family, and they're trying to figure out where the one kid's gone. But then you have these two little fucking kids that are like, just randomly in the middle of the movie, they're like, oh, we've been talking to Black Phillip. And you're like, fucking weirdo little kids. And you don't think anything of it. And it's a great mislead to whenever he actually does do something.
Oh, I swear for the longest time watching that movie, like the first time I watched it, I remember thinking, they're just fucking around. They aren't talking to shit. Nothing is happening. They're just little dickheads. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of it, when you fucking see Black Phillip walk behind Thomasin and say all that, I'm like,
well, not to mention, kills the dad.
Well, no, exactly. Yeah, in goat form, he kills the dad, literally impales them with the fucking horns.
Yeah, whenever he walks
Gores
behind.
him.
That's one of those things, too, is like, I know it would probably change the movie's dynamic, and especially the scene, so much. But if you look up Black Phillip human costume, like that's all you have to Google, and look at what the actor actually looked like, and he kind of had this like dandy costume on with a big hat and a feather, very like Three Musketeers-y looking.
Yeah, he's like a musketeer, a buccaneer, a cavalier,
but he looks
all
so
those
cool.
things.
And I've seen people talk about like his outfit didn't seem right for the time. I'm like, yeah, it did. You just have these really poor farmers, these settlers in New England, and then you have this guy who is like the devil kind of.
And he's clearly he is of wealth and of means, and he can give all that to Thomasin. That's like the idea.
A boot and a hand and like a little bit of a gold sheen off of part of his jacket. I would have loved to have seen more of him in the movie, but I think it would have absolutely ruined it.
Right. Robert Eggers, hopefully, maybe he can expand into that universe. It doesn't seem like he has any plans to anytime soon, but I think a Black Phillip film.
Black Phillip 5, Black Phillip in New York.
Right, Black Phillip 6, Phillip goes to space.
Right.
Nothing's blacker than a black hole,
Oh my god.
That's the movie I want to see, is Black Phillip in fucking space.
Someone do that spinoff for us.
Right, that is a series that needs a franchise right there. The Bitch franchise.
There we go.
Yep.
And speaking of some weird little comedy there, the next one we're going to talk about is The Wicker Man.
Everybody told us to talk about The Wicker Man, but we have to confess something
We have
here.
a confession for
We
you
do
guys.
have a confession.
We have never seen the original Wicker Man.
Neither one of us
we
has
have
ever seen
only
it.
seen the 2006 Nicolas fucking Cage Wicker Man.
That's right.
And I'm really sorry about that. We actually wanted to watch it before we recorded this episode so we could talk about it. We know a lot about it. We've seen tons of clips about it.
Yeah.
I think it was even recently on the 101 Scariest Movie Moments countdown. So there's a lot. I feel like you can't be into horror and not know a little bit, at least about the original Wicker Man. But so we're only going to really talk about briefly the new one here.
Right, yeah. Nicolas Cage, the remake made in 2006. Everybody shit on it. Even Christopher Lee himself shit on it. And with good reason. It is not a great movie.
No.
But it's a lot of fun because, Cage gone Cage.
Exactly.
Nicolas Cage brings his absolute Nicolas Cageiest performance to this role. And how can you not love this remake of The Wicker Man when it literally gave us the Nicolas Cage bees memes and GIFs and videos that were all over the fucking internet?
Exactly. Like, there's been patches and stickers and probably body soap at this point of shit of that fucking basket of that basket over Nicolas Cage's head where he's going, "No, the bees, not the bees,
not the bees."
But it's iconic at the same time. It's one of those movies I feel like I've seen multiple times. It's always bad, but I always kind of enjoy it.
Right, I enjoy it too. It is a guilty pleasure movie for sure. And I want to say Ellen Burstyn, I want to say is in it as well with him, and Lily Sobieski. Like, it's a weird cast.
It definitely is.
Those are actors that I would not have thought would be in a movie together. The interesting choice to recast Sir Christopher Lee's role with Ellen Burstyn. He was very skeptical of it, and with good reason. But yeah, it had potential. I mean, The Wicker Man is one of those stories that I feel like is timeless, is ageless, and I think that's a quality of folk horror because, as we were talking about, a big theme of it is you're out there in the wilderness on your own. And, we talked about it last week with found footage with movies like The Blair Witch Project. And yeah, you do. You find yourself on your own, but that you can always find that. That will always be there. The possibility that you could end up stranded in the middle of nowhere and you are subject to some local freaky shit that is going on in that area, in those woods. Yeah, I mean, that is something that could happen to anybody at any time. Yeah,
and I think that's kind of one of those things that makes folk horror probably one of my favorite genres, is because I tend to really enjoy the scary movies that feel realistic, like we've talked about The Strangers before. And I feel like some of these movies are, you look at Midsummer, you look at the Wicker Man, and they both have a lot of these old world, Norse pagan, Celtic kind of influence as far as like the religious aspect, if I even want to use that word. But it's really grounded in reality for me, and that kind of makes it really scary. Like, you could just be like, oh yeah, I'll go to a Midsummer festival, and then end up dying and being like buried half underground or flayed open or put in a fucking bear.
Yeah.
But
that's what
with
I'm
the Wicker Man,
yeah.
That's the same thing. Is at the end of the movie, the iconic thing where they put him in this giant totem kind of a thing and light it on fire, and he burns alive.
I mean, it's
that's fucking
Burning
scary.
Man.
Yeah, it is. Burning Man gone wild is just the Wicker Man. Now, the next one, I'm fucking excited about this. I've seen a lot of people got to interact with a stupid little video that I posted on TikTok the other day. But there's a movie that came out a couple years ago. It's directed by David Bruckner called The Ritual.
The Ritual is a fucking tough movie to watch. It's got a lot of hard stuff in it.
It does.
I mean, it literally starts off with a guy and his best friend ending up caught in a robbery at a convenience store.
I don't think it starts that way. It starts with one of the guys died and they all get together to go on like a hike. It kind of feels a little Descent-y, like, hey, let's go out in the woods for therapy.
It's like The Descent, but with dudes.
But midway through, there's the weird scene in the woods where it shows us why they're out there and how this one guy died and why one guy seems to be like a little bit more guilty feeling than the other. Is, as you were saying, basically there's a robbery in a convenience store and their friend gets killed, and it's he blames himself for this.
Right, and forgive me, I meant to say that that's the story. It's
Yeah,
not that's
sorry,
not
no.
the beginning of the movie, but it is the start of the story. Like it starts with his guilt,
Yes,
and then
yeah.
he and his friends are then in the wild to kind of honor their friend's memory. But as they're now, left to their own devices in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of the woods, not knowing where they are, not knowing what to do, not only are they disoriented, but then weird shit starts happening to them to make the disoriented feeling worse.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those that starts with little like creaks or kind of movements in the woods, and then there's runes on the trees, and then they find a place that they can sleep in, but it's like a weird old abandoned house with weird shit in it, and they all have crazy dreams.
I think that's my favorite part of the movie is when they wake up in the cabin
so
and
good.
all weird shit has happened to all of them. Like the one guy wakes up and he's like, I pissed myself. And you're like, what?
Right. Yeah,
It's
he's like super embarrassed about it, but then
Yeah.
like another guy's actually kind of hurt, and the other guy like woke up like naked outside or
one
some
guy's
weird
missing.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, one guy is missing.
Right,
And
it's fucked
and
up.
it's just-
It's one of my favorite scenes in the whole fucking movie because it's like it sets the tone that nothing from here is going to be good or rational or sane. You just prepare for a fucked up ride.
Right, but they also in that moment kind of gaslight themselves into thinking nothing happened. They're like, "You guys just had bad nightmares,"
Right,
and like they all
everything's
just
fine.
like kind of try to collectively go, "We're not gonna fucking acknowledge that," and like keep going, and like it gets worse and worse and worse.
Ultimately, then it becomes a fucking creature feature at the end when
Hell
we see
yeah.
this giant fucking, I don't even know what to call it. It's got
So-
antlers, it's got a fucking mouth that makes you look like there's a person. It's just it's fucking wild, man.
Yeah, it's got a really weird face, and like there's arms hanging upside down, and I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but it's Jotun. So like Jotun, I'm not sure exactly.
Jotun.
Jotun.
Yeah.
But it is actually a creature that's based off of, I was looking at this earlier, based off of a real like Norse mythology god. So it's really cool because I did for the longest time, there are probably a couple years now that I've watched that, and I'm like, that's just my favorite creature. But seeing that it's something that yet again is based off of this old religion is so fucking cool. And I feel like I'm explaining folk more as we talk about these because the last few movies have a lot of religious influences in
Right.
them.
Well, folklore, I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
plays a big role in folk horror by your definition, not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
by mine, but yeah, by your definition, the folklore is as important as an element to the story and to the atmosphere of the film as the actual physical location is.
Yeah.
So, as we've talked about with some of these, the Vivitch, the legends of witches in especially in New England, when around the time of all this Salem witch trials, witch hunting and shit like that. Wicker Man with a cult, literally, that burns an effigy of a man with a man inside of it.
Yeah.
The ritual, this beast, this creature that is inspired by actual, Norse mythology. So I mean,
Right,
it's all
and
there.
it-
It's all there.
And it's, for the ritual towards the end where they actually find people, it's basically these people know that this creature's out there. They worship it.
Right.
It's
It's
their
a deity
deity.
almost.
So,
Yes.
they give sacrifices to it. There's some pretty gruesome scenes in that movie. One of my favorites is probably the impalement scene where the guy gets like pushed into the tree, because this forest, mind you, is not just like, oh, pretty normal, like happy, like North America
Yeah.
trees, like in the middle of fucking Indiana. They're like those tall with lots of little branches. It almost looks like you're walking through thorns. And so even the forest setting for that movie is so fucking cool.
Yeah, it
because
shows that part of the danger is from the forest and the woods itself.
Right.
It's not just this creature or whatever, or the weird shit that's happening to them. It's just being out there is
Yeah,
treacherous.
because there's like the guy that just like, he falls and like hurts his leg. It's like that can just fucking happen to you. There's nothing, supernatural about that.
No.
And, it weighs heavy on the group as this guy has to keep stopping and they try to keep going, all these things. But I think probably it's very high on my list. I feel like it's very underrated. I love it whenever I see people talk about it. I feel like, because it's been out, maybe 4 or 5 years? I think,
About
at this
5
point.
years now. Yeah, I think it came out 2017.
And I feel like
originally.
it's grown a bit more of its following, and I hope that there's people that listen to this who've never watched it and decide to go on Netflix and watch it, which I think is still on there. Streaming, I believe it's a Netflix original. So it's worth the watch, and it's really cool folklore with a really good story. And we didn't spoil everything, so just go watch it.
There's a few things we spoil, but not everything. And but it makes sense to me why, like David Bruckner, you mentioned, directed it, and it makes sense why he would have been selected then to do what we just saw with Hellraiser. Like Hellraiser this year is probably one of my favorite horror films to come out here in 2022. So I don't mean to keep bringing it up here on the show, but I absolutely loved it. And David Bruckner deserves so much praise, not only for Hellraiser, but for The Ritual.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at is his design, his creature design. He thinks outside the box. You know, as in our notes here, I have it that he directed the Amateur Night segment from VHS that introduced us to the succubus, played by Hannah Fierman. And we talked about it with our found footage last week.
Yeah, because it's like the first short in the first VHS movie.
Absolutely, but it shows that David Bruckner, I mean, between his design of the succubus, between his design of the creature in the ritual, Jotun, and then Hellraiser, I mean, he is, I think with those three alone, he has solidified himself as a master of visual effects. Yeah. And he's definitely somebody that his name is gaining that kind of reputation, where if I see his name attached to something, I am going to be in favor of it. I'll be first in line to fucking watch it.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, I'm sure he has really amazing teams that he works with on these movies. But, you know, a lot of that does come down to them going, yeah, I like this design. Because I've seen, you know, multiple concept artists that I follow where it's really cool to see what their idea was, even if it didn't get into the movie. But I feel like picking that one and going with that one is just, like, the best choice. Like, whoever designed that, and he greenlit it, like, fuck yes, because it's my favorite, like, creature. But yeah, his name, I mean, probably ever since I saw The Ritual, you know, anything with his name kind of piqued my interest, because I thought that was such a good, fresh movie for the time that it came out.
It was a breath of fresh air, I agree. It was unlike anything else we were seeing at the time.
Because I mean, I like slow burns, of course, and I feel it's
very much a slow burn.
It is a slow burn, which I feel like a lot of folk horror is. But there was just something so different about it when I saw it. And probably, I mean, the monster, the creature really just sells it for me, because it's kind of like the Deborah Logan scene you were talking about, where everybody knows it, but they didn't know what movie it was from.
Yeah.
I feel like the scene in The Ritual where the creature bends down in the doorway and it's like dangly arms that look like human hands, like grab the doorway, and it like leans in and peeks through into the cabin. Sold immediately. I only needed 10 seconds of that movie. And it was up at the top of my list from there.
Yeah, you don't see the creature very long. In the film.
Very
it
minimal
has
screen time.
Minimal screen time, but at the same time, it makes such an impact on you that you don't have to see it that long. It delivers everything it needs to in those few minutes that it's on screen.
If it's even a minute, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very, very little. I feel like it's probably 2 minutes.
Blink
top.
and you'll miss it. Yeah, it's very quick.
But it's a fucking fantastic movie. I love it.
Yeah, one of the best in folk horror that we've received recently. The next movie we want to talk about is another recent favorite of ours. We talked about Paranormal Activity last week with found footage, but this is Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. We kind of touched upon it briefly last week, but this is where Paranormal Activity, the series, the franchise, decided to give it a new twist and make it folk horror. So our crew now finds themselves out in the middle of nowhere at this Amish kind of these grounds, this Amish community, where the main character's mother came from, and she's trying to retrace her roots and trying to find her family, and she reaches out, she finds a relative.
Right, and of course they're doing like a whole documentary for it, so that's how you're like, here's your found footage.
Right, it's a documentary because basically she took a fucking 23andMe, and she's like, oh, I'm Amish. And now that's our setup for the fucking movie, and she and her crew, her camera crew that is documenting all of this with her, are out there, middle of nowhere, at the mercy of this Amish community, and with it being an Amish community, very few resources at their disposal other than what they brought with them.
I mean, probably the scariest thing in this movie is whenever she's kind of like doing some touring and doing like, I guess, B-roll footage type shit, and they're in a barn, and she almost like missteps, and like one of the guys grabs her, and because she's like up in the loft part of the barn, and you like look down, there's this giant machine that clearly like just eviscerates things, and it's like that's kind of
It's like
the
a Chekhov wood
scariest.
chip. Chekhov's
Right.
wood chipper is what I would
Right.
call it, because you see it and you're like, oh, well,
Exactly.
we're gonna see that come into play later.
Bingo, and I'm pretty sure you do. But yeah, it's like just the setting made me more uncomfortable, I think, than anything in the movie.
Right, and the Amish community that they're in, the people, obviously, she finds out they are legitimately her family, and she's
But
trying to
they're
find.
also legitimately not Amish. They're like a fucking cult.
Yeah, it's not Amish, it's not Mennonites. Like you find
Right.
out it's a cult. Like I love this scene. I've been thinking about this since we started talking about Next of Kin. I think my favorite scene is where the guy ends up in the car with the postal service
guy,
yeah, the mailman. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word mailman all of a sudden, but yeah. So he's in the truck with the mailman, and they're driving back to civilization so that they can reach out to people, make a call, and you find out from the mailman, he's like, yeah, they're not Amish.
Right.
It's a fucking cult.
Yeah.
And it's like, holy shit. You like you're like, it's just mind blowing. Like when you find all this out, because these people have been staying in the care of what they thought was a Amish community family that they had, and it turns out they're a cult.
Yeah, and they're sacrificing people to an entity to keep it at bay, which the thing that I really fucking love about this movie, which I think is why it's so highly rated for me, is the whole time we're watching this, I think, how is this related to the other movies? So far, there's been nothing. It hasn't given me anything.
Right. It felt like a complete total reboot.
Yeah, it just felt like they were like, well, we're an anthology kind of movie series now, so here's something completely different. But the names that they use for the entities in the movie, when you look them up, you come back to Toby.
Yeah, it's all a reference to Toby.
Yes, because you have this antagonist, protagonist kind of fighting energy demon shit, and biblically the names
Osmodeus is the big one that they keep using. Osmodeus, Osmodeus, are the ones that they keep using prominently throughout the movie to describe the demon, the antagonist, that they are coming closer and closer into contact with this whole time. But of course, the Osmodeus, or Osmodeus, however you want to pronounce it, the reason he adopted the name Toby is because Toby, in the folklore of it all, was an enemy of Osmodeus. He opposed him. So when Osmodeus defeated Toby and bested him, he fucking took his name. Like that's a boss ass move, and that is then the Toby that we are then introduced to in Paranormal Activity 1 through 6.
Yes. So you basically find out that this demon that they've had, you see it, there's like murals and shit in this weird old church that they're not allowed to go into, but it's because there's like a basic fucking hole in the ground that goes down to this entity they're keeping at bay, which is so fucking weird. But
yeah, where have I seen that before? It's somebody who's down in a hole, a well, and the only thing that's missing is the fucking lotion,
Exactly.
It's like, put the lotion on the skin. It does this whatever it's told.
Buffalo Bill just caretaking a demon down
I got
in a
fucking
well.
Buffalo Bill vibes the whole time they were in that. Every time, once I found out it was a well, I'm like, God damn it.
Yeah, but it's like also a well that they needed like full fucking like spelunking gear to go down.
It was a little bit more intense than Buffalo Bill's.
But yeah, you find out that this demon is basically the nickname of the name extension is Toby, and so you think back to the original movies where they get that name and the little kids are like, oh, it's Toby, and you're like, Toby, fucking weird. So it is all connected, but you actually
it's the same demon
don't
throughout the whole
quite
movie.
understand it unless you kind of read into it a little bit. Because I didn't. I watched it the first time and I still was fucking clueless until I started reading about the demon and the name.
Yeah, it is one of those that benefits from some research being done. Next one we're going to talk about in our exploration of the folk horror genre. Another recent favorite of ours, Gretel and Hansel.
Yes, and I know you're excited to talk about this one for one reason, mainly being the director.
Yeah, I love, directed by Oz Perkins, who also directed The Black Coat's Daughter, I Am the Pretty
yeah.
Thing That Lives in This House. Some terrific fucked up horror movies that will bend your mind. And Gretel and Hansel's no different. But Oz Perkins, if you don't know that name, he is also the son of Anthony Perkins, who played Norman Bates the original Norman Bates, and my favorite film of all time, my number one, Psycho. So Oz Perkins has a pedigree that, I mean, you can't beat it. I mean, when you're the son of the biggest legend in horror, yeah, you better be bringing your A game, and he does. Gretel and Hansel is terrific folk horror, but one thing I love about Oz Perkins, and I can't say this enough, is just how simple his films are.
Yeah.
They're not complicated. They're not over the top. They just play on themes that we can all relate to. I mean, and with Gretel and Hansel, I mean, it literally starts off, she and her brother, her family's too poor. Mm-hmm. So her mom literally just says, I can't fucking support you, so you got to go be on your own now, even though you're children.
Right. This isn't your typical, let's take the Grimm's Tales and make it cute. Oh, it's a candy cottage. Yay. And it's like everything's just happy-go-lucky.
No fucking candy cottages here, bro.
Kids are just like on a hike in the woods or whatever. Like, no, like these, it's fucking literally grim start to the movie.
It's terrific. I love how in your face it is, sad and depressing. It's like, because like I said, you get that their mom literally just fucking cast them out. Like she's like, I can't support you, so fucking leave.
Yep.
And it's that cold. Like she just cast them out because she can't support them. Then they try to find safe haven somewhere, and the person they find fucking haven with is a piece of shit and chases them out, and they're like fucking scared for their lives, and they go and they find this nice little cabin cottage in the woods that happens to look freaky as
absolute fucking house goals, by the way. Me and my niece always talk about this house because it's perfection. It's like got this whimsical weird curve and the spooky pointed roof, and then it's all black and the windows are stunning. This house is absolute. If I was a fucking little kid in the woods, I saw this shit, I'm running for it. It's fucking awesome.
And they do. And like the story with Gretel and Hansel, they find the house. In there, they meet a witch. They don't know she's a witch, obviously, but they meet a witch. She invites them in. She wants to fucking eat them. But and she does the whole thing of fattening them up, and she feeds them every day, and she's doting on them and spoiling them. But she's creepy as fuck because she's got these black fingers, which is already a dead giveaway that she's a fucking witch. Because when have you ever met somebody with black fingers and they're not a witch?
Right.
100% of the time, it works every time.
I want my fingers to look like that every day.
Well, yeah, and she's got these creepy eyes. She's overwhelmingly not a pleasant person to be around just physically looking at her. Mm-hmm. And then, she starts talking, and then she gives you the willies too.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of the actress's name, but I absolutely fucking adore her. No one else could have been this role, in my opinion.
Right. The name is escaping me as well, but she's the same actress who played Sleepwalkers, Stephen King Sleepwalkers, directed by Mick Garris. So great, movie there. She was the main antagonist in Silent Hill back in 2006.
Hell yeah.
She's got a reputation for playing some awful fucking ladies.
I'm probably going to mispronounce this because the last name is Krige. It's Alice Krieg?
Alice Krieg? Alice Krieg, I want to say. We'll say Alice Krieg.
I was going to say, I could only remember the witch's name, which was Hulda, but I couldn't think of her name until I pulled it up. But yeah, she's a really cool witch. They give her this nice little backstory where you kind of see some of her past and her relationship with her daughter. But you also get Sophia Lillis's character as Gretel kind of almost like working with her to try to gain like witch abilities, basically.
Right. And one thing I find very interesting about this, the way Sophia Lillis plays it, maybe, because it's one, like I said with Oz Perkins, it's simple the way he does this, but so much of his film is left up to what I always refer back to Hemingway's iceberg theory, whereas you see what's going on the surface, but that is like 5% of the story, and there's 95% is completely underneath the surface and left for your interpretation and your imagination. And with Sophia Lillis, the way she plays this, it's almost like I feel like she plays the character more timid and more afraid when they first meet her, but then the more she finds out about her, and when she learns that she is a witch and she's not great and she's kind of evil and shit, it's almost like Sophia Lillis, her character of Gretel, warms up to her.
Yeah,
and I'm like that was the one thing when I left the theater that I had the hardest time wrapping my head around. But it's such a great detail.
It is, because one of the things that I really like whenever, shit goes south, and obviously they have, the witch wants to like eat Hansel and they have to fight. So there's a really cool scene though where Gretel basically uses some of the things that she's learned from Hulda to beat her. Like, she uses a flying ointment. Like, that's a huge thing with witches. And obviously we don't use a flying ointment and hop on a broomstick and fly around. Like, I fucking wish it worked like that. I'd save a lot of gas money. But it's cool that she learns something in the movie from her, and you feel like she's trying to almost groom her into also being a little evil witch child. But she's like, fuck you. You wanted to eat my brother. I'm going to be a cool witch and kick your ass.
Yeah, I'm still going to be a cool witch, but also fuck you. It's like, I love that ending where she's so just resolute in her beliefs and her stance on the fact that you tried to kill my brother. Of course, we're not cool.
Yeah.
And then she, the last scene is her in the woods and her fingers start to go black. And you're like, this is fucking tremendous.
Right.
Like,
she becomes the new witch of the woods, basically.
From start to finish, Gretel and Hansel is visually one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
One of the most well-acted movies I've ever seen. It is damn near perfect. And I know we like a lot of movies. We're very friendly to a lot of movies, and we heap a lot of praise on a lot of movies. But man, Gretel and Hansel, like, I just recommend everybody see it and judge for yourself. It's a slow burn. It's not very like action packed. It does very much rely on the performance of the actors and the conversation and also the nonverbal communication. There's so much that's not said.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not exaggerating when I say it's an iceberg movie, because there's stuff going on the surface, but really the true story, the meat of it, is just underneath the surface, and you are left to wonder and imagine what the fuck is going on. And by the time you know what's going on, movie's done.
Right. It's, as you're talking, no pun intended with this movie, but it's one that you have to kind of digest a little bit. And then right. The more you think about it, you're like, oh, okay. Like, she was feeding them dead children.
Right.
In the beginning of the movie. So you kind of have to think about that and process that, and then kind of play it over again in your mind and think of those little scenes to kind of piece it together. And to me, I feel like it's a movie that deserves a second watch, because
it necessitates a second watch.
Yeah,
for sure.
because then you do notice those things back at the beginning of the movie that you didn't realize the first time through. It definitely builds the more you watch it. But I just remember sitting in the theater when this came out, which I think was one of the last movies maybe we even saw before everything shut down.
One of the last few movies before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And we sat there and we were both just in awe, because the sound is beautiful, the visuals are beautiful. There's just scenes where they're walking through the woods and it just feels like you're right there.
Yeah.
And everything's just so pretty. But they do, he does a great way at, making you feel that weird, eerie darkness in certain scenes.
He's one of those directors, Oz Perkins, where you feel his film. Like it's totally encompassing. It's like I said, it's the acting. You mentioned the sound. It is like, because they're in the woods. You hear the leaves crunching, the twigs snapping.
Right.
You get all of that. And
that's exactly how Blackcoat's Daughter is.
That's what I was just getting ready to say. Blackcoat's Daughter is the exact same way, because you feel everything in that movie, the atmosphere, because it takes place in the winter and it's very snowy and shit. You hear the crunching of the snow, the clicking of people's shoes against the pavement, car doors slamming. Oz Perkins makes you feel every single detail of his films. And I think that's why, of course I'm biased because I love Psycho and Anthony Perkins and Norman Bates, but I truly believe he as a director, if he were not related to Anthony Perkins whatsoever, he would still be one of my favorite directors because of his style.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah, Gretel and Hansel, terrific. We're going to move on to another director that doesn't have a lot of movies under his belt, but he's fucked everybody up with the 2 movies he has released. We're talking about Midsummer, directed by Ari Aster, who also directed Hereditary, which we talked about not too long ago.
Yeah, and I love Midsummer. Again, I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, talking about the realistic settings that you get with some of these folk horror movies. I mean, basically all of them that we've talked about at this point. But I love that Ari Aster made this movie bright white sunlight after Hereditary was like gloomy and a lot of like nighttime scenes, and kind of played off of like,
it was a dark movie.
Like
visually,
fireplace
it was a dark movie.
lighting and things like that. And I remember seeing the trailer for this, immediately going, what the fuck am I about to witness? But also thinking it was so cool because there's not a lot of horror movies that are just take place in this bright setting like they do with this beautiful countryside of Sweden that they do in Midsummer.
He makes great use of the setting for sure. One thing I love that I'm sure people have seen in videos online is that he would also incorporate details of like Danny's family members' faces, like her sister's face can be seen in one of the trees during a scene where she's walking through the commune there.
Yeah,
it's so funny to me what Ari Aster can do visually with his films to make you feel things.
And I want to know where that comes in, like when you're working on the movie, because obviously it's an edit. You can't make the trees out in the countryside look like dead people. But
if he can, he's a better director than I even fucking thought he was. I think he's pretty damn good.
Right. But it's like I just wonder where in the process of your filmmaking do you think, you know what this scene needs? Make those trees have shadows to look like her dead sister with the like respirator thing duct taped to her face. That is the most fucked up thing. And I remember the first time I saw that image on some bullshit thing that popped up. It's like 10 things you didn't notice when you watched Midsummer. And like, that's the one image that they give you. And I just saw it and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
It's so fucked up, but it's Ari Aster and it just feels like it's perfect.
I may be in the minority when I say this, but I think I like Midsummer better than I like Hereditary. I think Midsummer fucked me up. Like, Hereditary fucked me up, but Midsummer was like scene after scene after scene. Like, literally, the opening of the movie is her sobbing unfucking controllably because she just lost her mom, her dad, and her sister.
Right.
And
a murder-suicide, basically.
Suicide. It's so fucked up. And then from there, it's like, she's got this shitty relationship with her fucking boyfriend, and it's just tense every time they fucking are in the same vicinity of each other.
Everything's so uncomfortable.
You get
about
the fucking
this
annoying couple at the goddamn commune. I fucking hated those two.
Yeah.
They were like two of the best annoying fucking characters. I would put them up there with the goddamn kid from Babadook. They're just, because they were all meant to be annoying, but they did such a good job. I fucking hated them.
They were. The realistic style of characters that you get where they feel like, immediately, and he did this with Hereditary, obviously, but you feel like these people are so fucking real. Like the dinner table scene in Hereditary felt absolutely real. I was at that fucking dinner table. And there's the scene in the living room when she like comes over to her boyfriend's house. All the friends are there and they're talking about this trip to Sweden that they don't want her to go on, but he's like, I want to break up with her, I don't want her to go, but I also don't want her to like fucking kill herself because I broke up with her and she's super depressed. And it's like this weird awkward conversation that takes place where you only see Danny in like the mirror of the living room. I feel like I'm in that living room. He puts me in his movies, no matter what scene it is. And
that is a great point. That is a terrific observation of what he does. You're right. He makes you experience it. Like I was talking about with Oz Perkins, like you feel everything in the movie. With Ari Aster, you're in the movie. Like you do. The way he films the dinner table scene in Hereditary, you legitimately feel like you're at that table.
It's almost like a POV without like the movement of the camera.
The perspective. You almost feel like, as fucked up as this sounds, if you were fucking Charlie sitting there, what she would be watching.
Right.
It's a very cool way to look at the movie. Midsummer is the same way. You almost feel like you're a member of the friend group. Ari Aster has this way of filming that is almost as close to first person as any director I've ever seen. And it's tremendous what he does with Midsummer. Like I said, you always feel like a fly on the wall.
Right. I was going to say, so it's like, I was just thinking, you either feel like you're part of the scene or you're like feeling what they're feeling, or you're experiencing what they're experiencing. Because even in Midsummer, there's the scene where they do like shrooms, I think. And
Right,
she's
yeah.
like looking down at the grass, and like the grass like grows off of her hand or some shit. You're like watching it and you're like, whoa, that's fucking wild.
Right.
But there's also scenes
yeah.
like at the giant long table that they set out in the field to eat, and you feel like you're at that table with the way he like films up on the table. Like he's not on one side or the other. A lot of the time there's shots where it's just straight down the middle, and it just feels weird to me. But again, it's so immersive, and the shocks in Midsummer are very unexpected, the same way with Hereditary.
Well, and I think that first person perspective that he tries to give the audience is what makes his scenes land differently than other horror directors, because it's not like he's doing anything really that reinvents the wheel, but the way he does it, you feel. I use the term voyeurism a lot with found footage, but his is voyeuristic in a different sense. Like I said, you feel like you're there, you feel like you're watching, you feel like you're part of it. You don't feel like you're a voyeur, but you do feel like you are just a member of the audience. Like when we've seen people get their heads smashed before on fucking movies and TV,
right?
The way it's
but
shot,
we
like,
haven't
you feel
seen
like
the
you're
guy
fucking
jump
there.
and then he kind of splats and you're like, oh, is this happening? But then they show like the close-up
Right.
and you're like, oh. And it's like he shoots it in a way that you never think you would see. I mean, he does exactly the same thing in Hereditary with the scene with Charlie where he's driving, her head gets decapitated, he stops, he's sitting there, it doesn't show the back seat, it just shows him the whole drive home, him getting to bed. And
Almost
then it like
feels like a fucking dash cam.
shifts to morning, and you hear the mom screaming, and then only then does it show Charlie's head on the side of the road, and you don't think that they're going to show it because of how far the scene's gone, and then it's there. And that's how it is with that fucking hammer scene in Midsummer. It's like you just don't know what's going to happen next, and all of a sudden the dude's got a giant fucking Harlequin mallet walking up to this guy to like finish putting him out of his misery.
Right. It's so disturbing and uncomfortable on so many levels. I think what really put it over for me, though, because I'll be honest, like I remember watching Midsummer, I'm like, yeah, this is really on pace with Hereditary. But I think what did it for me with Midsummer, really put it over the edge for me, was the fucking scene. It was the scene where, you know, the ladies of the cult are getting Danny's boyfriend and making him fuck this girl, and they let Danny find it and see it. And they have that crying scene, that fucking, so the scene goes from like this pure elation because it's the May festival, she's she's having fun, to fucking she sees her boyfriend fucking the girl,
cheating
to
on
intense
her.
crying.
Yeah.
It's just this Ari Aster made you feel a range of 10 different emotions within probably a 15-minute scene.
Yeah.
It is, and maybe even less than that. It feels like it goes on forever, but it's such a small fragment of the movie. It's so good though. It's so fucking good. Like Midsummer, like I said, I like it better.
It's
in
really
my
good. I don't think I could at this moment. I would have to sit and write down all my pros and cons and like weigh them to really decide which one's my favorite. But I think because they both kind of have, you know, the witchcrafty type shit.
They do, yeah.
You know, you have the very obvious, you know, like the payment symbols everywhere in the symbol, you know, in Hereditary. Whereas this, you have this kind of, again, pagan-y,
more of a cult, yeah.
Cult, even though we talked about this before, where it's weird because, like, I celebrate Midsummer, but I don't, like, I'm not in a cult. And it's really cool to see something that's, again, based in reality, that this is an actual celebration. People do dance around maypoles, but if you're hanging out with these people, you're hanging out with the wrong people. And the thing that I love most about this movie is that it convinces you that it's one of the You Go Girl movies, but it's not. Like, it's still really miserable. Everyone's like, yeah, burn your boyfriend, fuck him. And it's like, no, she's joined a cult now.
Yeah, it's like, is that really a better situation? Like, you're in a cult. Like,
yeah.
fuck, you know, nobody wants to be stuck in a shitty relationship, and nobody wants to be in a cult either.
But it makes you go, you go, Danny. Because it's like she just lost her whole family, and then she's losing her friends. Her boyfriend, who she thinks, you know, they're probably endgame, is probably what she thinks. is cheating on her to getting rid of him and being celebrated as May Queen. And it's like she's lost everything and gained anything. Or, I'm sorry, lost everything and gained everything within a moment. Like when she smiles at the end of the movie, it's like she has
made to
everything
think she's
there.
gained everything,
but
she
it's
hasn't
still
gained.
really fucking depressing. Like
It is.
she's just in a cult now, and she still has no family and no friends and no boyfriend.
Right. She goes from one abusive relationship to another, essentially. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're going to travel back in time on this next movie. We're going to talk Apostle. Now, Apostle is one I don't see talked about a lot in a lot of the horror circles online. But it's a really fucking good movie.
It's a delight.
It's directed by Gareth Evans. If you know that name, he directed the Raid movies, which who doesn't fucking love the Raid movies? Was one of the directors on Safe Haven from VHS2. One of the segments we actually didn't talk about last week.
Right.
But it is intense. It's where there's a cult, and it involves creature feature, ritual suicide, all that good shit.
Which he does in Apostle.
Right, and we see more of that in Apostle. And Apostle we love because it stars a couple of our favorite actors, namely Dan Stevens.
Yes, I love that man.
Dan Stevens is a fucking dreamboat. And if you don't believe me, just Google Dan Stevens. He's so much of a dreamboat that he played the fucking Beast in Beauty and the Beast. I mean,
literally.
He was literally a fucking Disney prince. That's how handsome and beautiful this man is.
Yeah.
And he brings that to Apostle. But also in Apostle, you get this tremendous story of a lot of fucked up religious undertones that
yet again, religious-y cult shit, like warping the church almost a little bit. There's a weird the scene that I was just like, oh, yeah, this movie's gonna be fucking awesome, was like people are like setting little blood offerings outside of their door at night, and you're like, oh, what are they doing that for?
Right.
And, you start to realize that there's creatures involved and they're like feeding the land kind of a thing. It's really, I don't want to completely spoil it, but there's basically this weird like deity that's become part of the earth, and that's what they're feeding. It like goes into the ground. Yeah,
and that's they worship it. They satiate it, and it takes care of them in the town and this little small village. And I think my favorite scene in the whole fucking movie is there's literally in the middle of the town, they take somebody, chain them up, chain them down, however you want to say it.
It's their justice system.
It's their justice system. It's how people pay for their crimes. And literally they take a fucking giant melon baller into a fucking guy's skull and like literally just fucking
rotates it,
and they like drill through his fucking cranium to where his head is just pulverized and his brains are all over the place.
Yeah,
it's fucking disgusting in the best way possible.
And I almost said a circular saw, but that's not exactly what I mean. It's literally like the saw attachments that you see on like power drills now to cut holes in things, and there's different widths. And this thing's like
holes in some shit.
This thing's like probably 6 or 7 inches in diameter, and it just points at the top of their cranium. But you have this guy on the with this cranking machine, and you hear it cranking towards the head.
You hear the torque.
And I think they're asking him questions or some shit or whatever. It's some weird public execution shit. But it's just the part where it's right up to his head, and you can see that it's getting ready to pierce the skin. And the way the actor is that's doing the cranking on this machine, the way he like looks and then he just shoves it down is so fucking terrifying.
It's
and then
fucking merciless.
And then you just hear the screaming because of course it's going to take a minute to get to your brain. It's just on a crank.
You ain't going to die right away.
Oh, it's so fucked up.
It is one of the most gruesome deaths I've seen in any fucking horror movie, and I absolutely adore it, and I love it.
They show a lot of it.
They show a good deal. But, I mean, it's Gareth Evans. That's why I brought up that it's Gareth Evans in the beginning, because if you understand what he brings to the table as a director, you're going to be like, I'm in for a fucked up ride, and you really are with this movie. It is surrealism at its best. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's still on Netflix.
Yeah,
so
I
recommend checking it out if you can. Mm-hmm. So we're going to hit a few more here before we wrap up. These are going to be a little bit more rapid fire. Antlers. I don't really have much to say about Antlers. I'm not gonna lie. I
was really excited. This was one of those movies that got pandemic delayed to hell. I think I remember seeing a trailer for it. Now. And yeah, it's a lot of people really like it, and I'm sure if a second watch, I'd probably enjoy it a little bit more. But it was good. It includes your folklore and your creepy shit and your good creatures. So it's a solid movie. I don't know. There was something I felt like was really missing from this movie. It just didn't give me that complete oomph that I wanted.
No,
but it's not a bad movie by any means.
To me, it's the definition of mediocre. Like, it's just, there's nothing inherently bad about it to where I'd be like, oh, I fucking hated it.
Right.
But there's nothing remarkable about it, which in the end makes me feel like I hate it for being so fucking mediocre. Because it was a good idea and I thought it had potential. Yeah. I mean, you got great actors. Jesse Plemons is a fucking heavyweight. I love that guy.
Right.
I really thought I wanted.
Story's great. Yeah. There's a lot of backstory with the characters. You actually feel some connection to them when you're watching it, but I feel like
they tried way too hard.
But you almost don't care at the same time.
No, you don't give a shit.
It's weird because, again, like you said with the actors, I feel like I was involved. Like I'm intrigued. I want to know more.
Yeah.
Especially with the little kid. The little kid in the movie is fucking great.
I give him credit. The little kid really brought his A game as far as an actor and his performance. It was one of the highlights of the film, but everything else was just flat.
Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like it needed something to me. Meanwhile, the next one, which is one of our favorite fucking movies. I've never seen all the shitty sequels, but in this house, especially living in Indiana, we stand the fuck out of Children of the Corn.
Children of the Corn. Started out, of course, it's Stephen King wrote it.
Yep.
And then it was adapted into this great 80s horror movie that is just fucking bonkers, man. Like, I remember watching this when I was younger and thinking, oh, it's a weird movie. And then I watched it as an adult and like, this is a fucking weird movie. And I absolutely
love it.
I dig everything about it. Like, from the fucking beginning, the scene where they're killing all the parents and fucking Isaac is just standing outside the bakery like, yup.
I love this scene so much. Okay, it was literally just on. They play it on Pluto TV a lot right now. They play it on Pluto
a lot. Yeah.
It's
I think it's actually on right now as we're recording this. As you're listening, it's probably on right now.
Go turn on Pluto.
Go fucking turn on Pluto. You'll probably find Children of the Corn.
But I had it on because we tend to pull up Pluto, see what movies are on, and if there's something we like, we just have it on for background noise. Usually is movies we've seen before. And Children of the Corn, as I've said, has been on loop a lot on one of these stations. And I'm laying in bed just kind of, dicking around on my phone, and I look up and it was coming on. And it's that scene. I love it so much because you have all these old people that are like, oh, yay, oh, we're at the diner. And it just seems so weirdly forced. And they all have fucking coffee. And there's like little kids in there, like one's just like eating ice cream. You have the Malachi kid. You see like actually you see him actually in the diner. And like as you said, you've got Isaac outside the window with his hat like, yes, do my bidding, little children. As they just like actually brutally kill. Like you see like little kid like slit an old dude's throat.
Shit.
And they're like they're shoving the guy's head towards like the fucking meat slicer and shit. Like it goes heavy, but you're like, I want to see this shit more often. All these kids in the town just up at one time, locked the fucking doors, and massacred all the old people.
It's a fucking wild story.
Don't get any ideas out there, Gen Z.
Right.
Jesus.
This movie is like almost 40 years old at this point. Maybe even more than 40 years old. But it's like, they went fucking hard for no fucking reason, and I absolutely love it. Like, it's one of my favorite just cheesy-ass 80s horror movies.
Yes.
Because it's not that good. It's like Linda Hamilton before she was Linda Hamilton, before Terminator. Before James Cameron got her and said, no, act.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of fucking performance from Linda Hamilton. And then all these kids, like, you talk about that opening scene, and you get the shitty narration from the one kid, and you get the Full Moon Studios special music behind it.
And then you get the weird ass special effects in the cornfield at the end of the movie. But it's just it's so much fun. Like, kids are fucking weird and creepy.
Right.
And like, what's scarier than like you taking a road trip with your like loved one and you get like turned around. You're trying to get back to one town.
And these fucking kids start trying to murder your ass.
Kids try to fucking kill you.
Call you shit like Outlander.
I love that fucking Outlander.
Outlander.
We have your woman, Outlander.
She lives, Outlander.
That's like, oh, it doesn't even matter. Like, I just yell for Stevie, and I'm like, Outlander.
We will be out in public yelling Outlander at each other. So if you hear that, fucking stop us and say hi, because it's probably us.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
It is. Another fun one that, Natalie, this is one of your absolute favorite movies.
Yeah, I don't know how the fuck we haven't talked about this yet. I mean, I know this is like episode 15 or 16 that we've done, but I almost said Pumpkinhead.
Pumpkinhead!
Because I love the way the kids say it in the movie, better watch out for Pumpkinhead.
Better watch out, Pumpkinhead gonna get you.
But Pumpkinhead is awesome. You get Lance Henriksen, who's a fucking icon. Stan Winston directed and his studio for the special effects, so you get this kick-ass fucking creature that looks like he's made out of the insides of pumpkin, but like mixed with a demon that someone brought up. Kind of mixed with Xenomorph in a way, like the way his head is kind of long. He's got a big old whippy tail, I think. But
this is one that I challenged you that I didn't think it was very folk horror-y of you, but I'll allow it because I fucking love Pumpkinhead.
Yeah.
And
it includes kids going out to basically a cabin. But they don't quite make it there. They kind of end up there, but there's weird local legend,
I wanted
and
to
that's
put Evil Dead
why
on this list. That's all I'm saying.
It could be. Hey, we could talk about folk horror for hours, but for Pumpkinhead, I love the fact that you have these kids that are going out. They're supposed to go to a cabin in the woods. There's like a fucking witch in the movie that tries to help. This guy who's summoned Pumpkinhead to try to bring his son back, who he's lost by, of course, the accident with the kids. And so you have all these elements. You kind of have, again, this folklore, this story that everyone around knows about. And basically, you might get what you want from Colin Pumpkinhead, but it's going to be fucking brutal for any teenager in its way.
It's kind of a monkey's paw situation.
Very much
it's like
so.
It's a new twist on the monkey's paw.
Yeah.
You be careful what you wish for. You just might get it, but you'll get it in a way that you didn't want.
Right. It's a little Pet Cemetery-ish.
Very Pet Cemetery-ish.
Of course, it probably had some influence there for all we know, but
it probably did. And when you think about the Pet Cemetery movie came out in 89, Pumpkinhead comes out in 90.
Right.
It's
Who
like,
knows?
I'm sure they were trying to piggyback on that a little
Yeah.
bit, but it successfully.
Yeah.
I mean, Stan Winston was like, all right, we're going to give you that story, but we're also going to give you a cool fucking creature.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite fucking designs for a creature ever. I feel like Pumpkinhead is probably forgot about too much from people, even though he's a huge horror icon.
Yeah, got like 3 or 4 sequels.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of them.
I think
They're
I've
rough.
only seen one,
They're
maybe,
pretty rough.
but
yeah.
It's one of those you can still watch that first one, absolutely fucking enjoy it.
Yeah, the performance of Lance Henriksen alone is worth worth its weight in gold. I say the same thing about that shitty Hellraiser sequel he was in. He's the only reason to fucking watch it.
I was gonna say, yeah, Lance Henriksen is fucking amazing no matter what he does.
Yeah.
But
I would watch him
he makes
read
any
the fucking
movie
phone
better.
book. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
He's terrific. The next one we want to talk about is probably like the start of folk horror, because it's folk horror literature. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah.
The film Sleepy Hollow, released in 1999, directed by Tim Burton. All-star cast with Johnny Depp, Christina Ricci, Casper Van Dien. All these legends of fucking Hammer horror were in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just a phenomenal cast. Like I don't like it's one of Tim Burton's best movies in my opinion.
It is. I agree. I'm as we've kind of said, we're not huge Tim Burton fans, but there are movies of his that I really, really love, and this is one of them. This is one of those movies that I saw and I was like, I want to make this my whole personality. Everything about the character, the design, the feel of it, of course, the score. I'm pretty sure you get Danny Elfman making this beautiful music.
Actually,
I'm sure.
I think it was one of the few ones that Danny Elfman didn't score. Like,
really?
Fact check me on that, but there's like a handful of movies that Danny Elfman did not score for Tim Burton, and I want to say this was one of them. Natalie's fact checking me right now, but I'll give my thoughts on it. Like Sleepy Hollow, like we said, we're not big Tim Burton fans. There was like a 16-year gap where Tim Burton just sucked ass. And this was like the last good movie he made.
It was Danny Elfman.
It was Danny Elfman. Okay, good. Because I was
gonna say,
worried.
I know that fucking sound. He just has the sound.
He does. It's Danny Elfman's music and his score for Tim Burton's movies are, I think, what helped create the Tim Burton aesthetic. Like,
Yeah.
that's why.
I feel like if I heard Danny Elfman music and anything else, I'd be like, is this a fucking Tim Burton movie?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and obviously he has scored other movies, but you're right.
Right.
You do have this weird feeling. Like, I remember, I think he scored Spider-Man and the original 2002 movie by Sam Raimi, and I remember hearing the Danny Elfman score, and it felt like a fucking superhero movie to me because the other superhero movies I had to base it on were Tim Burton's fucking Batman movies, which were scored by Danny Elfman. Like,
Right.
he just has this feel that can, like, Danny Elfman's music can transport you anywhere, and Sleepy Hollow is a terrific example
Exactly. You're immediately in this gloomy little town of Sleepy Hollow, New York, and there's murder mystery about, and they're just like, here, you need a Bible.
Yeah.
And, he's like a scientist, of course, but Christina Ricci as Katrina Van Tassel is just my favorite. Everything about her is just so beautiful and pretty and whimsical. And then you add in this fact that she has like these witch books and she's a practicing witch and she's doing these protective sigils and things. I love all the witchy shit that they put into Sleepy Hollow for this movie. It's even with his little flashbacks.
Yes.
It's just, they're so good. And
Yeah.
it's such a pretty movie.
I mean, and I haven't even scratched the surface. I mentioned the cast, but you also get Christopher Walken as
Yeah,
the Hessian,
I was
the
about ready to
Headless
say.
Horseman. You get Sir Christopher Lee in a fucking cameo as the
Walking
judge.
in a winter wonderland.
Walking, oh, it's crazy in a winter wonderland. That's my terrible Christopher Walken impression. You're welcome for that. But Christopher Walken as the Hessian, and Christopher Lee add to the cast.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to say about this, though, coincidence that I didn't think of until we started recording, was I a friend of mine and I rented Blair Witch Project and Sleepy Hollow on the same night and watched them back to back. So I'm thinking we did found footage last week with Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
We're following it up with Folk Horror and Sleepy Hollow.
There you go.
That's a terrific double feature. I highly recommend to everybody. Blair Witch Project
That's
and
a
Sleepy
solid
Hollow.
one. Hell yeah.
That's one I would love. But let's be real though. One thing I always loved about this movie, and secretly in the back of my mind, was that it's Edward Scissorhands and Wednesday Addams. And like in my head it was like this weird fan fiction where it was like every fucking goth nerd from the early 90s who grew up in the 99 was like, this is everything to us.
Yes.
Like,
and that's how I felt. Like, that was my favorite era of Johnny Depp, were those movies before, like, the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie out. And I feel like everything changed, and he was just Jack Sparrow all the time.
right.
He
stopped acting.
He was great at this, odd, bizarre, fainting Ichabod. And Christina is, like I said, she's just ethereal. She's got this beautiful blonde hair, and there's this scene where she's like on the white horse, and she's in like a blue dress, and everything about her just looks fucking amazing. Like, every aesthetic in this movie. That's what I said. I wanted to make that movie my whole personality.
I think a lot of people did. To me, it's peak Tim Burton. I know I said it's his best film, but it is. It's where he peaked. It was his best. It was his plateau as a filmmaker, in my opinion. Everything else since then has been trying to capture the magic that he had leading up to this, and then what he did and accomplished with this movie.
Yeah.
Tim Burton just hasn't been the same since. This was his last real movie where I felt like he was making what he wanted to make, and
I
after
agree.
that, it was just all commercialized bullshit. This is the last piece of art that he really made.
I agree. I really do.
Yeah. It's we love Tim Burton. We can't say anything bad about anything because he's given us so many things to love.
Well, we can say a few bad things.
Right. No,
But,
he's not perfect by any means, but yeah.
He's kind of, I feel like more and more has been a piece of shit, mainly with the character design choices that he has.
There's some
very anti people of color.
Right.
Which is
There's some
kind of
controversy
bullshit.
there with Tim Burton and kind of his casting choices, and I mean it's there. Like I mean, Sleepy Hollow is a tremendous cast, but there's something that's glaringly, obviously missing from that film.
Literally everything he does.
Yeah. He's got his flaws. And we'll probably delve into that more as we discuss more of his work throughout the coming, weeks, months, and years. But the next movie we want to talk about, this was my entry into it, where Natalie was a little on the fence, but she can't fight. She can't argue with this one.
I was a little on the fence, but the more we talked about it, I was like, all right, I see it. So
we're talking The Ruins.
Yes.
And I don't know, this is a movie I don't get to see talked about a lot.
I was gonna say, this is like the third one here that we've had that I would definitely put on like a top 25 not talked about, needs more love movies.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know why people don't talk about The Ruins more.
You showed me this movie. You've talked about it. I think you showed it to me a year or so ago. And it kind of fucked me up. Like, it's got some scenes in it that really make my skin crawl. And that's because the plants are like trying to get inside of you.
Literally, it's the plants. It's nature trying to kill you. And the title is that these American tourists are down in Central or South America somewhere, and they are told about these ancient ruins that they have to check out.
Yeah,
it's like you don't want to go see the touristy shit. You want to see the real shit.
Yeah.
And they go and they're taken to these ruins, and you find out that, there's all these legends and these it's very verboten kind of place, and you find out the reason that is because the fauna of the area is literally murderous. It's homicidal, and it tries to kill people.
Yes. And you get a language barrier because these Americans who are in a foreign land, these locals are trying to tell them to get away from it. They don't understand. They back closer to it. And one of the guys touches or like walks into the plants, and they start screaming louder and louder and louder. And the guy that's in the plant starts to try to run forward, and they shoot and kill him. And so then immediately everyone backs up onto the ruins, like, I don't want to fucking get shot. So then they're all immediately contaminated, because what you realize as the movie plays on is all those leaves have to do is brush against you, and you're contaminated. The thing that I would love to have expanded on this movie, though, as I think about it, is it's always at the ruins. I want to know what the locals do to keep it from spreading and taking over their entire forest.
Well, I feel like there was potential there. Like, you could have expanded this into a whole universe if of sequels and franchises and shit. I'll be honest, I think the biggest obstacle this film had to overcome was the fact that it came out the same year as The Happening. And
oh God!
When you discuss that plot, that sounds very similar to The Happening.
Yeah.
So if I saw The Happening fail, which it fucking did miserably.
Yeah.
And I hear a plot similar to it, I mean, I think that was what it was a victim of. When in reality, The Ruins is a far better film and explores that concept much better than The Happening ever did. So The Ruins, to me, is like, if you saw The Happening and you're like, this plot has potential, but it's got Mark Wahlberg and Zooey Deschanel. Enough said.
Like having
like,
weird conversations with the plants.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Whereas
if you see that and you're like, this plot had potential, but I don't want to see that shitty acting.
Yeah.
Go in to watch The Ruins, because The Ruins has, terrific cast. You've got Jenna Malone, one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Joe Anderson, who's another one of my favorites. Those
Love
two
him,
are fucking heavyweights and carry a lot of the acting of the film.
Yeah, but they're all really great.
The whole cast does a terrific job.
I know one of the other guys in it, I think I had seen on a probably Fox canceled show that was called The River, I think. So I had already seen him in this kind of weird, like, jungle-scape horror setting.
There was an Ashmore in it, if I remember.
Yes, there was an Ashmore in it.
One of the Ashmores is in it.
Yes.
Yeah, he's really good at it.
They basically, they go up these ruins, and there's these leaves, and all they have to do is touch them, and they, they're looking for somebody that was supposed to be out there, I think. And there's a sleeping bag or whatever. It's like the guy that's kind of local to the area. Yeah. He's like, oh, my friend was here. He should be here.
Right.
But he's not there. But his shit's there. And then they start to hear a cell phone ring down in this hole, and they decide to go down in the hole. And the coolest thing that made me, like, lose my shit when I watched this movie is they're so close to this sound, the girl is. And then she turns, and you see that one of the flowers on the plant that's growing all over this thing is like doing this weird vibrating movement, and you realize that the plants are mimicking the noises that they've heard, so it can make the sound of the cell phone of the guy that was there that they most likely killed.
Right. The mimicry is one of the most terrifying things of the whole fucking movie. I think the scene that got me the most is where it's like at night they realize that it's one of the girls in the one of the main girls. She realizes it's under her skin.
Ugh,
and then you wake up the next morning, they're like, what are you doing? Because she's not sleeping. You know, she wasn't with them when they all woke up, and they look, and she's literally trying to cut it out of her skin, and you see all the spots where she's just hacked her fucking body up, and you're like, it's fucking gruesome, and she just keeps trying to cut into her fucking flesh, and it is very well done. And you still have this, and then there's all this personal drama between the main four, you know, these couples. Oh, it's I love The Ruins. Like it's one of my movies. Like, I will die on that hill. When we're gonna do an episode in the future of movies that could have been franchises or movies that deserve sequels, and I'm gonna go to bat for The fucking Ruins, man. I think that had potential to be such a bigger deal than it was.
I absolutely agree. I feel like this could have been so much more. And, you know, now that you mentioned the same year as The Happening, I'm like, well, fuck.
I think that's what fucked it ultimately.
You know, it could definitely be something there. But it's such a scary movie, and you get some really jarring scenes. But you also, you know, you have these people yet again out in these elements trying to survive while these locals keep them from basically leaving. It's like you either stay up there and survive long enough to figure it out, or you come down and you die when these locals kill you because they're not going to let you off these ruins.
Right, because they know what happens to people who are infected.
Yeah, so the local legend is with the plants, and you never quite understand what they are or where they came from.
But that's beautiful to me. Like, I don't think, like, you know, everybody talks about the beauty of Michael Myers is we don't know what drove him and motivated him. Yeah. It's the same thing with these plants, in my opinion. You don't know what caused this or what started it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as I sit here and talk about, if we got a franchise, we would have to explain more. So I get it. It's probably one of those things that maybe it worked better only being one movie. But I do love that ending, too. Yeah. Where he sacrifices himself for her and she makes a run for it. From start to fucking finish, man.
Which is why we need a sequel, because that bitch gets away and she's got that shit growing all over her pants, like all the little like plant spore things. Yep. So it basically gets out. Like, it gets out of the ruins. Are the ruins what's keeping them there? Is it free now? We don't know.
I think it could have been explored further, man. I think there was so much fucking potential for this movie.
It's such a good movie. I could gush over it. It's definitely super underrated. I feel like I don't see anybody ever fucking mention this movie. But
not enough people talk about it. Last movie we're gonna talk about. We're gonna end it on a low note. We're talking Cabin Fever. I said we're going to get to it earlier. And I know we do that a lot, where we say we're going to get to something and we don't do it because we have ADHD brains, and we apologize. But I said we're going to get to Cabin Fever, and here we are. It is from 2002, and it was directed by the great, legendary, epic Eli Roth. And I say that kind of facetiously because he's done a lot for the horror genre. He definitely has an appreciation for it. But on the other flip side, he did give us some shitty stuff in Hostel.
Yes, he did. Yeah, very much so.
He's kind of one of those guys, like, I feel very ambivalent. It's like, on one hand, I really love some of the things he's done for the genre, and I love Cabin Fever. I actually do enjoy Cabin Fever. It's a very guilty pleasure movie for me.
Yeah, it's got some shitty, weird acting, but it's another one kind of like The Ruins we were saying. It makes me really fucking uncomfortable.
That's the purpose. I mean, with movies like The Ruins and Cabin Fever, it is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. Yeah. It's made to make you feel icky. Like, I fucking love it. And one of the things that we love is kind of the humor that Eli Roth brings to the film too, because there's the scene in the general store at the beginning where obviously there's, you know, some not so great language used. Yeah. But ultimately there's this little fucking kid sitting in front of the general store, and
Dennis.
They keep trying to talk to him, and he doesn't say anything. And finally, the one guy, the dumbass of the group, goes to touch him and sit next to him, and he learns that no one sits next to Dennis.
Yeah, it's like a little kid just like bites him or some shit. But it's literally, I know you're
so fucking
he's
funny
fucking losing it over here, because it's one of those movie quotes that we use a lot whenever something just fucking stupid happens, especially if we do something we know we shouldn't do. It's kind of become like,
everyone knows not to sit next to Dennis.
Exactly.
You know, like that's the lesson you have to learn in life.
And it's just the fucking greatest. It's such a weird movie. It makes me really uncomfortable. Like I said, the as a woman, the bathtub scene made me really uncomfortable where she's shaving her legs. And it's like, first off, bitch, why are you even shaving over it? But you brought up how this like can kind of eat up your brain as well as your body. So they're probably a little out of their minds as their bodies are rotting, literally. But, you know, they basically get this disgusting thing. It's like a weird body horror movie. They just are like getting eaten alive by this weird parasite. Their skin's falling off.
Yeah.
And it's just so fucking freaky, and like the water is contaminated. And
it's Eli Roth's love letter, in my opinion, to the Evil Dead.
Yeah,
because
it's kids going out in the cabin in the woods,
and
then you have weird shit happen because they're fucking stupid.
Right. It's terrific. I love the simplicity of it. Mm-hmm. And you know, he tried to get too cocky and too cool for school with Hostel and stuff, and you know, so his career kind of it's had some ups and downs, and shit like Green Inferno, but he's Cabin Fever, he really started strong. It was a simple movie with a simple premise and a simple plot. And to me, I absolutely love it. And, I don't know why we got a remake so quickly. And it has literally a 0% on fucking Rotten Tomatoes. That's how bad the remake is.
Exactly.
It's so shitty.
It's so American Psycho 2 level.
That's another story for another day, folks. But yeah, so... Cabin Fever, I think, perfectly encapsulates what folk horror is about. You're out in the middle of nowhere, you're left to the elements, and there's something you can't see trying to, get the better of you. And so it's, I say we end on a low note, but it's just, it's something that just, to me, perfectly sums up everything. So folk horror, whether you, fall on the side of being very specific like Natalie or being very general like Stevie Scares, you'll agree that these movies perfectly sum that up. These were the best movies we could pick that we love, that if you are not familiar with folk horror, or you're just now looking at it through the lens of this genre, because for a long time I didn't even realize that this was a whole genre of film that was out there. Like, we'd all seen these movies, we all knew they were out there, but now we are more aware these, Cabin in the Woods movies are more than just Cabin in the Woods. They're there's a lot of... There's
witches, and there's pumpkin heads, and there's kids in the corn. And, I know that there's so many, especially classic older movies that fall in the folk horror that we've never even seen, just whenever I was looking at stuff. But
City of the Dead is one that came to mind when we were talking about that. That was a great movie that we caught last year. It has folk horror feel to it too, so that's what kind of there are some that it's it's a little bit of a gray area. You might
and there's some that are very, very glaringly obvious, like some of the ones that we spoke about, like Wicker Man and The Ritual. And whether, like what you were saying, no matter what you think a folk horror is, we would love to hear what you think a folk horror is. So as always, you can always connect with us on pretty much any social media platform at this point besides Facebook. We're millennials, we're off there. Of course, you can email us at horrorzoidpod@gmail.com. Let us know. Interact with us on TikTok. We want to know what your favorite folk horror movies are.
Yeah, just today on TikTok, as of the recording of this episode, I posted a video on our TikTok saying, I think Scooby-Doo from 2002 is a folk horror movie, and I want to know your opinion. Do you agree with me, or do you disagree? So, yeah, let us know that, too. And again,
wrong.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the people say.
We will. The people will speak for us.
We have had so much fun with this, and we're going to keep going. We are going to keep having fun. So thank you again, and thank you for your support. And on that note, we're going to leave you with this. Bees, not the bees. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every weekend. Follow us on TikTok @HorrorZoidPod and send emails to horrorzoidpod@gmail.com with your thoughts, questions, and stories for us to read on a future episode. To all our Zoids out there, stay scary.